Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, then please don't forget to hit that like, share and subscribe button and ring the bell for all things horror. Today we are diving into a slasher classic that took the genre by storm in the late 90s, Scream 2. Released in 1997, this sequel not only had big shoes to fill, but it also got the slasher conversation rolling again. So let's cut right to the chase. Scream 2 picks up 2 years after the events of the first film, with our beloved survivors Sidney Prescott, played by the amazing Neve Campbell, Gale Weathers, played by Courteney Cox, Dewey, played by David Arquette, and of course Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy. Now, as usual, there are plenty of new characters thrown into the mix while trying to navigate through college life, and another Ghostface killer starts stalking and killing everyone once again in order to make a sequel, a copycat killer. The film opens with a shocking scene, and it really does set the tone for this movie perfectly. In fact, I feel that the cinema opening scene kill, it is just as iconic as the opening scene in the first film. Even though there is no Ghostface on the telephone scene in this opening kill, we do however end up watching Stab, which is a movie about the first killing. A movie within a movie. And I always find the first kill scene with Maureen Evans proper haunting and a little bit disturbing. The fact that Ghostface just stabs her over and over again numerous times in a very busy cinema, going unnoticed by everyone else, is just, I find that quite horrific. I mean, so many people are there, but nobody actually sees what's happening, within all of the chaos. And then Maureen, she ends up climbing on top of this little stage thing, and then she's standing in front of the screen, showing everybody then in the audience her horrific injuries. That is when the shit gets real. It's absolutely amazing. It's definitely my second favourite opening scene in the Scream world, with the first movie being my first. This time around, we're treated to a masterful blend of horror and humour, along with a sharp commentary on sequels themselves by character Randy, which I will get onto in just a moment because I do want to talk about some of the characters now. Now you've got Sidney, who returns as the resilient character who just can't seem to catch a break. Now I just love how they evolve her character in the sequel. She's not just a scared victim, but she's actually a survivor fighting against the odds. And Neve Campbell just looks absolutely flippin' fantastic in this movie. Her whole look is just brilliant. Then we have Dewey, who's played by the amazing David Arquette. He brings that comedy relief while being a lovable goof, because you gotta have a little bit of something to lighten the mood somewhere in the movies. Although I do prefer when Dewey does become more of a serious character and less of the comedy character as the movies go on, but that's just a personal taste of mine. Of course, we have Gale Weathers. Her character gets even more layers this time, navigating her own ambitions while keeping an eye out for the latest Ghostface copycat killer. And just once again, the chemistry between the cast is electric and adds real depth to the narrative. And as I said in my previous review with the first Scream, you don't get that often in a horror movie. However, there is also one character, Randy, who does return for this movie, but he sadly ends up on the wrong end of the knife in this sequel, and it did shock audiences around the world because Randy was a proper fan favourite character. Even to this day, and many sequels later, I've seen so many people chatting online about Randy being killed off way too early. He easily could have, made it to Scream 3, maybe even Scream 4, but I do think that Wes Craven wanted to show everyone in this sequel that nobody was going to be safe in this movie. I mean, we do get Dewey getting stabbed once again, but he does manage to survive, and we see him, towards the end of the movie coming out on the stretcher and going into the ambulance, which seems to be a little bit of a theme with, especially with the newer characters in Scream 5 and Scream 6, because we get that with some of the new characters, and I think that's quite nice. But my thoughts on Randy being killed quite early on in the movie is, I do think maybe it was a bit early for Scream 2. I think I would have preferred it if he made it to at least the final act of Scream 2. I mean, it still would have been a bit painful, but you know, what you gotta remember though, guys, is that people do die in the Scream movies. That's what this film is all about. It can't just be all of the new characters, you know, the characters who we don't really care about. At some point, certain audience members' favourite characters are going to bite the dust in the Scream movies, and it will always be controversial, but look at us still talking about Randy all these years later. I can't disagree with Wes Craven. He is the horror god on this one. So yeah, the plot of Scream 2 is a thrilling ride filled with twists, turns, and the classic whodunit style that, you know, which kind of is all what the Scream movies are about, and, you know, keeps you guessing who is the killer. Now, what I appreciate here is the self-referential humor. It doesn't shy away from addressing the tropes of the sequels and horror films in general, like the girl running up the stairs. It actually does poke a little bit of fun at itself while it's delivering the scares, and I think that is just so refreshing. Visually, Scream 2 is just as stunning as its predecessor. Wes Craven's direction really shines with some extremely intense, beautifully shot sequences that amp up the horror. And let's not forget the soundtrack. It is a perfect mix of haunting melodies and high energy tracks that make you feel every moment. Now, moving on to the Ghostface killers, and just a little bit of a warning: if you haven't seen Scream 2 and you don't like spoilers, then please stop watching right now, because I'm going to be talking about the Ghostface killers. So we have Mrs. Loomis as one of the killers, and Mickey, or Mikey, however you want to pronounce his name, he is the second killer. Now, I actually love this killer reveal because Mrs. Loomis, she is indeed Billy Loomis's mother, and she is out for some good old-fashioned revenge. And I gotta say, Mrs. Loomis is fucking crazy. She is batshit crazy. She has these piercing, bulging eyes that are nearly popping out of her head, and she literally is going to stop at nothing to kill Sydney in revenge of her son's death. And the final battle between these two characters is just flipping epic. It's one of my favorite final acts and killer reveals, obviously apart from the first movie. I felt that they really did pull out all of the stops. You couldn't take your eyes off the screen when these scenes were playing out, and aside from maybe Scream 4, which is a review I will be doing, you know, later on in this month, I do feel that the rest of the Scream movie killer reveals are all just a little bit bland since Scream 1 and Scream 2. I mean, they tried to reenact this scenario in Scream 6 with Richie's family and the three killer aspect, you know, with it being the whole family wanting revenge, but I just don't think that it had the same effect as the Mrs. Loomis reveal. At least it didn't for me. Because her character, she plays this odd news reporter throughout the movie, and she uses this fake name, Debbie, and literally nobody suspects her. It's only when she walks in during that final act and Sydney sees her and calls her Mrs. Loomis, what the frig are you doing here? That is when the penny finally drops. I thought it was a really, really good, very well put together story that really complemented the first movie, and at the same time it brought a lot more to the franchise. Mickey, the second killer, was just some crazy guy that Mrs. Loomis had found on the internet. I'm not sure if it was on one of those forums, maybe like a psycho killer chat room type of thing, but he was just a cuckoo. He was absolutely cuckoo, but it's definitely Mrs. Loomis who stands out for me as the killer reveals in this movie. Overall, Scream 2 is a fantastic sequel that captures the spirit of the original while expanding the universe. It balances the horror, the humor, the meta-commentary beautifully, making it an absolute standout in the slasher genre and in horror movie sequels as a whole. If you haven't seen it yet, then what the frig are you waiting for? Go and get it right now. And if you are a long-time fan, it is definitely time for a rewatch, especially with Halloween just around the corner. I do think that Scream 2 is probably the most rewatched sequel that I have gone back and rewatched. So with that being said, I am giving Scream 2 a solid 8.7 out of 10, which is the same score I gave to the first Scream. Now, it's got suspense, humour, and the charm of the original, making it a must-see for any horror lover. Let me know, guys. Let me know in the comments box below, what is your favourite moment from Scream 2? And how do you think it stacks up against the original? I want to hear all of your thoughts on this one. Okay then, guys, that is a wrap. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this review, then please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror content. And until next time, guys, stay spooky.